You're listening to LSU Daily with Matt Musso, your home for all things LSU sports.
Off and running here on another edition of LSU Daily. Welcome in and glad to have you along for the ride. Well, busy times around football operations over at LSU. Brian Kelly filling out his 2025 coaching staff and doing so in a massive, massive way that should only add even more intrigue and more expectations upon the 2025 season. Everything seems to be falling in place. Maybe falling in place isn't the right word, but coming together the way that Brian Kelly wants it to, and that is only going to, as we said, increase the expectation. We'll talk about the hire of Alex Atkins. We will talk about the addition of Lance Guidry on the defensive side. And, of course, to wrap, we will give a brief thumbnail recap of LSU's loss to number 1 Auburn on Wednesday night in the PMAC. So get subscribed, like, share, all of that greatly appreciated. Follow me on social media, Twitter X at Musso Matthew, on Instagram at Matthew Musso1. You can find me on Facebook as well. All of that greatly appreciated. Let's go ahead. Let's dive right into it, and we will start with football and the hires. And we're going to start with Alex Atkins. There should not be one person that follows LSU football, covers LSU football, that considers themselves an LSU football fan, who is not fired up beyond belief that LSU went and added Alex Atkins. He will fill the role of tight ends coach and run game coordinator. Of course, tight ends coach was left vacant after Slade Nagel took the offensive coordinator job at Houston under Willie Fritz. And that was really quiet for a long time, what LSU was doing in that realm, like what they were looking for. And when we kind of talked about it here, one of the names we always threw out was Tommy Rees, who obviously eventually accepted the offensive coordinator job with the Cleveland Browns. But one of the reasons I loved the potential for Tommy Rees is a lot of the reasons why I love this Alex Atkins hire. What LSU was clearly after in this role was somebody in that same image as Slade Nagel. Somebody who had coached tight ends before. Somebody who had multiple years play calling experience. Somebody with an acumen in the running game. And someone who was a very, very established recruiter. That was Slade Nagel. And Alex Atkins checks every single one of those boxes. He is extremely, extremely experienced in college coaching. His first full-time role that wasn't like GA grad assistant was at Tennessee Martin, his alma mater, in 2008, where he coached tight ends. He's been an offensive coordinator at Charlotte and most recently, of course, at Florida State. So there's your multiple years play calling experience, your experience coaching a tight end group. Told you right off the top, tight ends coach, run game coordinator. At Florida State, in his first season as the OC in 2022, he, led a running game or orchestrated a running game that ran for over 200 yards per game, 214 per game at Florida State. Now, that number dipped a little bit in 2023, but that team was also 13-0 and should have been in the college football playoff, and they had 3 freak show receivers on the outside. So your run numbers dipped a little bit, but it was still better than what LSU put forth, which Florida State in 23 was 150 yards per game. This is a guy also who has dealt with and installed and been a part of offensively multiple different running schemes. When he was at Georgia Southern in 2014 through 2015 with Willie Fritz, he coached an offensive line that dealt with a triple option, that ran a triple option. This is a guy well-versed in the running game, and LSU has to improve there. This is the one problem with them offensively in 2024. Garrett Nussmeier threw 4,000 yards because he had to. Thanks, he's really good, but you couldn't run the football. Alex Atkins is going to help with that. Back to the wealth of play calling, the experienced play caller in him. Brian Kelly has just consistently said, even when Mike Denbrock was the offensive coordinator at LSU, that Denbrock was in charge of the offense, but they took ideas from everybody because they have such a, great offensive staff, an experienced offensive staff. And that became even more apparent with Joe Sloan. Like, it's still Joe's offense, but, Cortez Hankton has that co-coordinator title, and he'd give input. And Frank Wilson would be able to give input, a guy who's been a former head coach and just a very experienced running backs coach. Slade Nagle, who'd been an offensive coordinator, gives that input as well. Brad Davis, Alex Atkins fills that role. It's another voice in the room that can help game plan and go forth. And it's a very accomplished voice. And then lastly is the recruiting aspect. Alex Atkins is a fantastic recruiter. And quite honestly, that's one of the reasons the name should sound most familiar to you, because of recency. Of course, look, LSU played Florida State the last 2 seasons to open it up, or I should say in 22 and 23, to open up the season. So that was Atkins' first 2 seasons as their OC. So, of course, we were well-versed in there. I mean, he was a candidate for LSU's offensive line position before they hired Brad Davis. So, I mean, we've been very familiar, but when we've been most recently familiar with Alex Atkins was in recruiting, and specifically with Solomon Thomas, a 5-star offensive lineman that LSU ends up flipping late in the 2025 cycle from Florida State. And Thomas gave an interview to Rivals at the end of December and talked about how he ended up at LSU, but also his relationship with Alex Atkins. And both of these cuts from a play, they go hand in hand. So keep in mind, he's committed to Florida State for a very long time. Alex Atkins gets fired because somebody had to take the fall for Florida State's abysmal season where they went 2-10. Even though if you win 2 games, your problems run much deeper than your offensive coordinator. And I guess, for what it's worth, they can the DC too. Mike Norvell, it's you on an island now, pal. You better hope that quarterback from Boston College works out. But anyway, when Atkins is fired, Thomas starts looking elsewhere. LSU had stayed on him. Naturally, he looks at LSU and tells Rivals that it wasn't just LSU that sold him on LSU. It was also Alex Atkins.
I went to a practice and I asked my coach, my ex-coach at Florida State, about the offensive line coach at LSU. He was like, he's a great dude on and off the field. He'll take care of you, beyond the football aspect of it. And that's always been a guy who I've wanted to, play for.
So Alex Atkins had a hand in you ending up at LSU, yes, even sir. After he had you committed at FSU.
Mm-hmm.
So how about that? Alex Atkins, after being fired at Florida State, has a hand in helping flip really one of their prized commits in that class to LSU. But what's even more in there is that shows you the relationship that Thomas and Atkins built, where even in the moment where, okay, I got to find a new school and he's not going to be there, but I'm going to ask him, I'm going to use him as a resource. I trust in him to steer me in the right direction. That's one hell of a bond. And it shouldn't surprise you when you hear this next cut about Thomas talking about his commitment to Florida State and Alex Atkins.
Atkins became almost like a father figure to me, a father figure, a friend, somebody I can talk the Bible about. And it was nobody really like to replace him, really, or somebody I can just see replacing him at Florida State because I was there for him. In any interview I've ever done, I've always talked about how Atkins was the reason why I wanted to be at Florida State, and he was the reason why I started to like Florida State in the first place.
It's the type of relationships this guy's able to build. And that's another reason that his addition makes even more sense. I mean, you got a guy like Solomon Thomas on there that loves the coach, and he's valuable to what you want to do offensively. Alex Atkins is what I mean there. Pair him back up. That makes an awful lot of sense. The other thing to note in the recruiting, and you know what, I probably honestly should have led with this part, is the ties to Louisiana. He spent 3 seasons at Tulane with Willie Fritz, down in New Orleans, recruiting the city, all of those things. That is absolutely massive when you look at what LSU wants to do. You build a wall around Louisiana. You secure the dirt. That's what you do here. And you've seen Brian Kelly change his recruiting philosophy from when he first got to LSU to finally really embracing that, and it's paying dividends. And the way he's done it is filling out his staff with guys who have Louisiana ties. Frank Wilson, Corey Raymond, Blake Baker, now Alex Atkins. We could go on and on. Brad Davis. We could go on. Bo Davis. We could go on and on and on and on and on. It's all of them. It's all of them. Alex Atkins checks that box as well. He checks every single box in what they were looking for. It is a slam dunk hire. Slam dunk hire for Brian Kelly and LSU. So Alex Atkins was the latest news in the coaching carousel, if you want to call it that, for LSU, and that pretty much fills out now your 10 on-field staff members. You're good there, unless you see something very unforeseen change. But spring practices, I'll probably call it a month and a half away or so. You should be pretty set there. On Tuesday, LSU announced, or it was reported that LSU will hire former Miami defensive coordinator Lance Guidry as a defensive analyst. You've seen plenty of turnover for LSU when it comes to the analyst pool and the support staff. And y'all, Lance Guidry is another name that you should be extremely familiar with if you followed any football in the state of Louisiana. That's a name everybody should know. And you talk about a wealth of experience that you're being able to bring in an analyst role. It goes deeper than that, but as a defensive analyst. You talk about ties to Louisiana and recruiting. Hello. That it doesn't. No one outdoes Lance Guidry there. This is a guy who played at McNeese, started his coaching career at McNeese as a GA, coached high school football in Louisiana at Leesville and then at Karen Crow twice. So you know he's got great relationships. And not only that, great relationships over in Acadiana, which is always a huge hotbed of recruiting for LSU, and one that sometimes people look at and go, man, how come they can't lock that area down? So bringing Lance Guidry on the staff, that's huge in that regard. You know, that's another feather in his cap. As we just talked about with Alex Atkins, another voice in the room. Well, that is absolutely Lance Guidry. This is a guy who has been an interim head coach twice, once at Miami of Ohio in 2010, once at Western Kentucky in 2012, and then was the head coach at McNeese State. So he's got 3 separate tenures of head coaching experience. He's been a defensive coordinator 6 different times in the FCS, in the Group of 5, and in the Power 4, most recently in the Power 4 at Miami, where I will remind you, his defenses ranked top 5 in yards per play allowed in the ACC each year in his 2 years there. So he's had success at each level, FCS, Group of 5, and Power 5 and Power 4. That's one hell of a voice to be able to bring in and talk and provide insight and help with game planning and all of those things. And then there's the caveat, the new rule that we've talked about plenty, that analysts can now coach on the field, in practice and in camp and all of that. That's just another check mark that Lance Guidry hits. Slam dunk hire. And I'm going to tell you, you look at this now and you ask yourself, has Brian Kelly built the championship staff? Is this the staff that can bring national title number 5 home to LSU football? Because, y'all, there is no, like, we went through this with the recruiting class, with the transfer portal, that they got the roster right. We thought they kind of had the coaching staff really where they wanted. Now they definitely do. There is no excuse for LSU to not be in the college football playoff in 2025. If you aren't, the conversation's going to change around the program. Because, like I said, you've got the staff where you want it. I don't think you could build a better all-star staff, especially at LSU, with all the ties to Louisiana up and down the staff, with all the head coaching and coordinator experience up and down on the staff. I don't think, and the track record of player development up and down, I don't think you could build a more all-star crew than you have at LSU. So it's taking you 3 years, but you've gotten it where you want it. Same with the players, same with the roster. Signed a top 10 recruiting class and the number 1 transfer portal class in the country. So you have guys coming in who can be the next foundation with that high school class, and you have immediate impact starters, which is about half your transfer portal class, coming in as well. It is where you want it to be. This team in 25 is built in your image. This is you. Now it's time to go deliver. You got a long way till August 30th when you go up to Clemson and face the Tigers, and that's going to be the most important game of the season for LSU. You have to win the opener in 2025. But you have to feel even better about your chances, given the fact that, again, they have everything where they want it to be heading into spring practice. Job well done. Now it's time to get the team ready and go win football games. All right, before we wrap up today, a brief thought on LSU's 87-74 loss to number 1 Auburn in the PMAC last night. Really just because this is a weird game. I'm not surprised that LSU lost by 13 points. LSU was a 12.5-point home dog in this game. After they dropped that game to Texas A&M, we looked at the schedule and said, you know what, 1-6 is likely at this point for the Tigers in SEC play to start, and that's where they are. Hat tip to Cam Carter. He had his 9th 20-point game, 24 points in it, and was awesome. Jordan Sears had a couple big threes to keep LSU alive and draw them closer in the second half, but ultimately, I said it was a weird game, and it was. LSU started the game on a 6-0 run, but Auburn ended up with 15 offensive rebounds in the first half, but they didn't get any second chance points, which is weird. And you would think, okay, well, that's what kept LSU in the game, but it didn't. LSU was down 41-29 at the break because LSU turned the ball over 15 times in the first half, and that led to 15 Auburn points. So while they got 15 offensive rebounds and got no second chance points, they got 15 points off of your 15 turnovers. But it was also weird because it was one of LSU's best three-point shooting nights of the season. And Matt McMahon had talked about, needing those extra possessions, offensive rebounds to, end up getting that. But, LSU made 8 threes, which is, again, one of their better nights. They just got crushed on the offensive glass, 25-11, and that obviously hurt them. And they turned the ball over 20 times. And Auburn's better than you by a lot. You don't have anybody that is Janai Broome. But then again, really nobody else does in the country. Of his 26 points, 20 of them came in the second half. He really was able to kind of take the game over, play the game at his pace. He also added 16 rebounds. So, weird game. The thing that's most frustrating about LSU is you can see that they are better. You can. Do they have problems? Yeah. The turnovers are gross and disgusting. They cannot shoot the three. That's a big issue because that was supposed to be a bigger part of your team here in 24-25. But you can see that they're better because this SEC is a gauntlet. It is the best the league has ever been, and that's not hyperbolic. It is the best the league has ever been in its basketball history. And you've seen LSU be competitive more often than not. The Missouri game was horrible. The Ole Miss game was horrible. But for a long time last night, LSU was competitive with Auburn, especially after falling behind in the first half. They made that game competitive in the second half. They were competitive at Alabama and Coleman Coliseum, which you never win at. They were competitive at Texas A&M. They obviously were competitive with Vanderbilt. They've been competitive through their first 7 games. The problem is they're good enough to be competitive. They're not good enough to win. They're just good enough to not get blown out. And that's the frustrating part. Because you knew LSU would be better, and they are. But you're just not seeing it in the win column. What are the issues for that? What are the things that lead to that? Roster is part of it. Again, you're better there, but you're not on the level of the top half of the SEC. Tigers host Texas on Saturday, 5 p.m. on the SEC Network. Texas, this looks like a gettable game if you're LSU. They come in and the Longhorns are 14-7, 3-5. This is one that you should be able to score on your home floor, and it's one that you better. But this is also a Texas team that took Ole Miss kind of to the brink on Wednesday night. They lost, but they had a lead there for a while and fell by just 3 points. That's a really good Ole Miss team that was on the road. But it's the second half of a road trip for Texas. That is a spot that should favor LSU. You get to be at home, and this is a team that you should be able to match up with record-wise, and hopefully you can get your second win in conference play and start to put a few together as the schedule does, I don't want to say lighten up for LSU, but it gets a little bit more manageable here for a week or so. We'll keep you posted whenever there's something of note here on LSU Daily. That's going to wrap it up for today. We appreciate everybody being here. Subscribe, share, like, follow me on social media, and be here next time for more on LSU Daily.